Midnight had a way of making the city feel both alive and empty, as if every echo from its streets carried the memory of something lost. The rain had ended hours ago, but its scent lingered, clinging to the pavement, to the quiet glass windows, and to the air that trembled beneath the hum of the streetlights. Adrian stood beneath the flicker of one of those lamps, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his long coat, eyes tracing the familiar outline of the cafe across the street. It looked almost the same as it had years ago, the same golden glow bleeding through the windows, the same crooked sign that read Le Soleil. The same slow, haunting melody playing somewhere inside. Yet everything felt different. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was the years that had folded between that night and this on, the years filled with unspoken words, unanswered letters, and the silence that had swallowed a love he thought would never end. He had promised himself he wouldn't come back here. He had promised he would let her go. But promises, he realized, were fragile things. They broke not with anger, but with longing. And tonight, something in the wind had whispered her name again. Elara. Just the sound of it was enough to draw him here, to this street where everything had once begun and ended. He watched as people passed, some laughing, some holding hands, some lost in their own small midnights. None of them knew that he had lived a lifetime inside this very hour, waiting for something that might never return. The city clock struck 12, and with it came a soft gust that stirred the world awake. Leaves rustled, puddles rippled, and somewhere in the distance, a doorbell chimed. He closed his eyes, remembering the night she left. The same hour. The same silence. Only the rain had been heavier then, and her tears had mixed with it as she whispered goodbye. He crossed the street slowly, each step heavier than the last. The cafe door creaked open, and warmth spilled out, the scent of coffee, faint perfume, and the soft crackle of old jazz. He paused, letting the air wrap around him like a memory. Inside, a few people lingered, lost in conversations or their reflections in half-empty cups. He took the corner seat, their seat. The one by the window where they used to sit for hours, watching the rain paint stories across the glass. He could still see her there, hair damp, eyes bright, smile fragile. She used to say that midnight was their hour because the world belonged to no one then. It was quiet enough to hear the truth. He had believed her once. But now, all he could hear was the echo of what they'd never said. As the minutes passed, he traced the rim of his cup, watching the steam fade like ghosts. He wondered if she ever thought of him, if somewhere, in some other part of the city, she too sat in silence, missing the same moments. The idea felt both cruel and beautiful. He had spent years trying to forget, but memory had a way of keeping its own time. And tonight, as the wind pressed softly against the windowpane, he realized that forgetting was never the point. Some loves weren't meant to be forgotten. They were meant to haunt you, quietly, endlessly, like a song that refuses to fade. The bell above the cafe door rang softly, a chime that seemed to slice through time itself. Adrian didn't look up right away. He didn't need to. Some part of him, buried deep in the place where memory and instinct met, already knew who it was. He could feel her before he saw her, that same hush in the air, the same pause in his breath that had always come whenever she entered a room. Elara. Even after all these years, her name felt like both a prayer and a wound. He lifted his gaze slowly, almost afraid that looking at her would shatter the fragile illusion of her return. And yet, there she was, standing by the doorway, framed by the faint drizzle outside and the golden warmth within. Her hair was longer now, darker, falling in soft waves that caught the lamplight. She wore a deep navy coat, raindrops clinging to the fabric like tiny stars. Her face had changed in the way time changes everything that was once familiar, not erasing, but refining, softening. Her eyes, though, they were exactly the same. Those quiet, unspoken eyes that had always said more than words ever could. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cafe seemed to hold its breath, and even the music faltered, fading into a low hum as if the world understood the gravity of this meeting. She saw him. And in that instant, every year between them vanished. There was no distance, no silence, no ghosts, only the quiet ache of recognition. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag, and then, slowly, she crossed the room. Adrian stood up before she reached him, his heart stuttering like an old clock trying to catch up with time. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the voice of a stranger, but of someone who had once known how his heart beat. He smiled, a small, uncertain curve of his lips. "Hi," he replied. Simple. Fragile. The kind of greeting that carried everything and nothing at once. The tea arrived, and for a long time, they just sat there, two ghosts sharing the same table, listening to the rain instead of their own thoughts. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she finally said, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "I didn't think you'd come back here." He looked at her, eyes searching for something he wasn't sure he wanted to find. "I promised myself I wouldn't," he said softly. "But promises don't mean much after midnight." A faint smile touched her lips, the same sad, knowing smile she used to wear whenever life proved her right. "You always did say that midnight was ours," she murmured. "It still is," he said, and for the briefest second, she looked like she might believe him. But then her gaze fell, and the distance returned, not in miles, but in memories. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. He wanted to ask why, but the answer was already there in her eyes. Some wounds didn't heal just because the clock struck 12 again. Some stories didn't get rewritten, no matter how many times you returned to the place where they began. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing softly through the quiet streets. Inside, their silence deepened, not empty, but full of all the words they would never say. And as the rain began to blur the city beyond the glass, Adrian realized that sometimes, love doesn't end with goodbye. Sometimes, it ends with everything you never had the courage to say when you still had the chance. The rain grew heavier, tapping steadily against the glass as if urging them to speak. The street outside shimmered beneath the golden reflections of the lamps, and inside the cafe, time felt suspended, stretched thin between the memory of what once was and the fragile tension of what might still be. Adrian watched Elara's hands, the way her fingers curled slightly around the teacup for warmth, the faint tremor she tried to hide. He had once known those hands better than his own, he had held them through winters and summers, through laughter and silence. Now, he couldn't even reach across the table. The space between them felt infinite, not measured in inches but in years of regret. The cafe was nearly empty now. The old clock on the wall ticked quietly, a metronome to the confessions unraveling between them. Elara's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. "I thought it would be easier for you," she murmured. "It wasn't," he said simply. "It never was." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain, steady and relentless, as if echoing every heartbeat left unfinished. "I met someone," she said suddenly, the words breaking the silence like a crack in glass. He froze, his expression unreadable. "It didn't last," she added quickly, almost apologetically. "He wasn't you. He was kind, gentle, but I could never stop looking for pieces of you in him. That wasn't fair to either of us." Her words hung in the air like smoke, soft and impossible to grasp. Adrian looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman he had loved, but the one he had lost, still trapped somewhere between then and now. The rain outside blurred the street into watercolor shadows, and he realized that the years had not healed them, they had only deepened the wound. In another life, maybe they would have found a way. Maybe time would have been kinder. But here, beneath the rain and the ghosts of everything unsaid, all they could do was remember. And sometimes, remembering was the cruelest kind of love. The storm outside softened into a whisper, but the silence between them grew louder, heavy with all that was left unsaid. The cafe was closing soon, though neither of them moved. The faint scent of rain lingered through the half-open door, carrying with it the quiet chill of early dawn. Elara traced the rim of her teacup with a trembling finger, her thoughts scattered between the past and the fragile moment unfolding now. Adrian's gaze never left her, as though he feared that if he blinked, she might disappear again, just as she had years ago. Adrian studied her face, every line, every scar time had left behind the proof of her fight, of her pain, of her survival. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I do know I never stopped loving you. Not even when I tried." A small, broken smile touched her lips. "Then maybe that's enough," she whispered. He reached across the table, finally closing the distance between them. His hand found hers completely now, their fingers fitting together as if they'd never been apart. The weight of the years didn't vanish, but for the first time, it felt bearable, softened by understanding. Outside, the dawn broke, spilling a pale gold light through the cafe window, and for a moment, it felt like the world was forgiving them too. He nodded slowly. Maybe we don't need to start over. Maybe we just start from here. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in years, she smiled, not the smile of the girl who had left him, but of the woman who had survived, who had returned. The sky above them deepened into pale gold, the light catching in her hair like fire. He reached out, gently brushing a strand from her face, his hand lingering for just a second longer than it should have. If this is all we get, he said softly, then I'm grateful it's enough. Elara stepped closer, her forehead resting against his. It's always been enough, she whispered. The city stirred to life around them, the first footsteps on the bridge, the low hum of buses beginning their routes, the river glinting with new light. But for them, time seemed to stand still once more. Adrian pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a gesture not of possession or passion, but of peace, the kind of peace that comes when two souls finally stop running. As they stood there, the sun broke fully across the horizon, scattering light across the river like a promise reborn. And though the night that had held their ghosts was gone, its memory lingered tender, unforgotten in the space between their hands. The bridge, the dawn, the silence, everything seemed to breathe the same truth now. Some loves never end, they just learn to begin again.